Jesse Weber is on assignment in the Harvey Weinstein courtroom this morning. I'm Aaron Keller with you until noon here on the Law and Crime Network. We have two live trials happening right now. We're going to take a break from both of them, though, to check in with attorney Andrew Maloney. He's an expert in aviation crash litigation, mass transit tort situations. This is all civil litigation. We're talking to him about the helicopter crash which killed NBA star Kobe Bryant a little bit more than a week ago. So, Andrew, the investigation is moving along here, and we're hearing that the pilot was instrument flight rated. He could fly a craft based solely on the instruments in the cockpit, regardless of how much fog is outside those windows, but that the company did not have such a rating. So break that down for us. Legally,
Sure.
What does that mean, and how might it affect a hypothetical case, assuming that lawsuits are going to start flying any moment here?
Well, most of the air taxis, what we call them, helicopter companies in Southern California don't have an instrument-rated certification for the company. Island Express is one of many companies in Southern California that fly air taxis, whether they be helicopters or small planes. And because the weather in Southern California is generally sunny and clear, they don't have a lot of days where they have clouds or fog that they have to worry about, which would require you to have the instrument-rated certification for your company. To get that certification takes time and money. They have to have, their pilots all have to be instrument-rated. They have to have extra insurance. And to fly instruments, you have to file a flight plan. There's a lot less flexibility in terms of the flight itself, what a pilot can do, where he can go. They have to file a flight plan with the FAA, the air traffic controllers, to let them know when they're going to leave, where they're going, what route they're going to take, how high they're going to fly, approximate speed they're going to be going. So there's a lot of strict flight following, if you will, if you fly on instruments. And if you fly on visual flight rules, the VFR, which is what they were, the pilots were doing that day, this pilot was doing, you can look out your window. You don't have to file a flight plan. You have a lot more flexibility. And generally in Southern California, you're going to be fine because it's clear and sunny. So most of the operations do not have the instrument-rated flight certification. That may be one of the reasons why this pilot flying Mr. Bryant on the morning of the crash, even though he was instrument rated, didn't file a flight plan and didn't when he got into trouble determine I need to get some altitude and go IFR and report myself to the ATC, because legally he probably was not allowed to because his company didn't have the certification. But practically speaking, since he had the training, that's probably what he should have done. I will tell you this, even when you have the instrument rating, if you're not regularly practicing it, if you're not regularly in those conditions, it can really catch you off guard. So even if with the instrument rating, he had a problem that he should never put himself in.
Exactly. Look, I mean, I've flown in Bell Jet Rangers as a news reporter for many local television stations, and that's what you have right now. Yeah. It's not exactly the type of aircraft that was used in this situation. But look, when a cloud comes up and you're looking out the front of a cockpit in an aircraft, you have to know what you're able to do in that moment.
Yeah, so if you see clouds ahead, which he clearly did, you want to avoid those clouds, especially if you're at low altitude, especially if you're going over mountainous terrain, because that terrain, the altitude will change underneath the helicopter very quickly. And if you can't see it, you're taking a huge gamble. It's a huge risk to fly into a mountainous terrain where you can't see the ground or you can't see what's in front of you. The seductive thing about fog is there are patches, I think we've all experienced some level of fog, where you can see some things, you can see some images above and below you, but you can't see everything. The problem was this pilot continued to maintain his airspeed. He was flying very fast. This helicopter can fly about 175 miles an hour. Not this one, the S-76, the Sikorsky. Mm-hmm. This is a Jet Ranger, as you pointed out, different type of helicopter, but similar. He was flying very fast, probably contacted the ground well over 100 miles an hour. Should have slowed down.
Okay, and also should have tried to seek elevation, but as you've said before, it can become very disorienting when suddenly you hit a fog bank and then you have to rely on instruments, which he apparently was trained to do, but his company wasn't able to do. So from a regulation standpoint, should more of these companies, in your opinion, seek the sort of regulatory approval that they need legally to fly in these situations?
Yeah, they should. They should if they're in a commercial business flying people, especially people that are willing to pay a lot of money to have an air taxi transport them around, they should spend the extra time, money, and effort it takes to get the certification. I'm not sure that would have changed the outcome here because this pilot flew on VFR, and the first 2/3 of the flight, he was fine. It was the last few minutes of the flight where he decided voluntarily to go into conditions that would have required the use of his instruments. And even with the training, he was putting himself at risk.
Now, legally, what we know now about the licensing status of the company, how does that affect any likely or potential civil litigation, which obviously we expect will arise out of this situation?
Yeah, whether they're certified or not, he flew into what we call instrument rated conditions, which increases the level of risk. And if he wasn't, the pilot may have been certified, but he didn't file a flight plan. So he didn't have any help from air traffic control. When you file a flight plan and you're using your instruments, in other words, there's a gyroscope on your dashboard there that shows you the attitude of the aircraft. It'll show you if you're nose up or nose down, left turn, right turn. It'll show you that. It's a floating gyroscope with an artificial horizon. So that's one of the key things you have to look at, that plus your altitude and your airspeed to know, and your heading, to know where you're going, how high you are, how fast you are, what the attitude of the aircraft is. If you try to look out the window in foggy conditions and think you can see something, you might not appreciate that you're in a descending turn. And if you're in a descending turn and the elevation of the slope under the mountain is coming up on you quickly and you can't see that, it's a recipe for disaster. So legally, he made, in my opinion, a mistake in flying into those conditions. He should have turned around and asked for help, or turned around until he got to clear weather and set it down.
Okay, so what we know now, does this make out a clear case for a breach of a legal duty based on the lack of the company's instrument-rated flight licensing? Because in tort law, we have to prove duty, breach, causation, and harm or damages here. So does this automatically make the case for the breach of a duty?
Indirectly, it's certainly going to be a factor. And I say indirectly because the ultimate responsibility comes down to the pilot and the decisions that pilot makes in the fatal minute or two of this flight. So whether or not they had a certificate for instrument rating, and this pilot did have that type of certificate and that type of training, he still made an error in judgment. So the company is liable, vicariously liable, for the negligence of its conduct of its pilot. So whether they had the certificate or not, there's still going to be some liability for that company.
Okay, so do you anticipate the lawsuits to basically start flying any moment now?
Well, they have 2 years under California law to file wrongful death claims. So they could file them at any time. There is no rush. The investigation's at an early stage. The NTSB is investigating. They'll look at the components for the helicopter. They will put pieces back together. There's no black box here. There's no data recorder. But there are parts on the ground that they're collecting, and they will look at those, analyze those, and they're pretty good at piecing together whether or not there was any kind of mechanical issue. It doesn't sound like there is at this point, but they'll have to look at that to rule that out. Everything that we're seeing and hearing points to a weather issue here.
Let's talk about legal damages. Should a lawsuit or a series of lawsuits be filed here? Kobe Bryant is somebody with a lot of money. If there's some sort of lawsuit filed on behalf of his estate and his daughter's estate, basically here, we might be talking potentially about astronomical damages here. He's somebody with a lot of earning power, brand sponsorships, whatnot. Can that play into any potential damage award, assuming we get to that point, against the helicopter company?
Yes, of course it's going to play into it. I mean, his estate would be entitled to fair and reasonable damages. However, there's a saying in my business that you can't get blood from a stone. It depends on how much insurance they have, the insurance coverage they have for the company, and what their assets are, because the damages here will be astronomical. And it remains to be seen what type of insurance this company has. And
again, here, I mean, the premise of tort law is to make a victim whole. And it's really a huge unknown what Kobe Bryant's earning power may have been. Most people, you can put some sort of a dollar amount above an individual's name on a piece of paper here, but we're talking about Kobe Bryant here. This isn't the average passenger on an average commercial flight or even an average helicopter flight of this nature.
Well, you're absolutely right. We typically hire forensic economists to evaluate the potential earnings and earnings loss of a person based on past and present history and try to project with some reasonable degree of certainty. The proof in a civil case is by a preponderance, meaning more likely than not. You tip the scales a little bit. The defendants usually argue that's speculative. You don't know what he would have done later in life. But you have a pretty good idea, given Mr. Bryant's background in terms of the projects he was working on and the things that he was doing and his ability to make even more money. So that income loss will be evaluated. And let's not forget, there are other people that were killed on this aircraft, and they have the same right and the same ability to hire forensic accounting economists to evaluate their economic loss, as well as the non-economic loss, the pain, the suffering, the fear, the loss of a parent or a spouse. Those will all be factors for damages. There's economic damages and non-economic damages, and all of that is going to be in play, and I have a feeling there's probably not enough insurance from this company to cover all those claims.
That would be the potential fear here in a situation like this. Loss of companionship, loss of consortium, those are all civil claims that can be made as well. Andrew Maloney helping us follow the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash, which killed a number of people, including that NBA star and his daughter. You handle this sort of litigation all the time, and we appreciate the update as this investigation progresses.
Great to be here, Aaron. Thank you.
We'll take a break here on the Law and Crime Network and be back with opening statements in the Texas prosecution of Christopher Hess. He's a former Dallas police officer accused of shooting someone fleeing in a vehicle. He's faced with aggravated assault by a public servant charges.